Hi, my name is Jennifer Hearn. I wanted to show you how I edit with depth in black and white. So I edit a lot of stuff in black and white, a lot of images. I always use Photoshop. You can do it just as easily in Lightroom. You'll see the same panel. We're going to use a camera raw filter and you'll see the same panel in Lightroom. So you can use the exact same technique if you prefer to use Lightroom. So this is an image of my son that I shot in my studio the other day. The lighting is quite flat, it's nice portrait lighting. I used a big softbox just slightly in front of him to feather the light in, so it wasn't particularly direct, and I also used another light on the background just to separate him a little bit from it. Now in Lightroom I did bring my shadows up just a little bit with the shadow slider. Other than that, this was a straight out of camera image. So just to show you what it looked like when I brought it in, you can see what I've done. I cropped off the side of his shoulder by accident. So I just brought that back in by extending and by moving this side over to here with a copy and paste on the marquee tool. So then I did a little bit of patchwork on the skin, just a little bit of skin healing and patch tool. You can see there the difference. And I brought in one dodge layer just to look after the dark circles and the uneven bits around his skin. So just a little dodge layer on 2 to 3% flow on the brush, on a white brush. So now we're left with this image, which I am ready to turn into black and white. So I'm going to use, I have an action actually for black and white that I generally use, but I'm just going to go for this black and white layer, which for some reason has gone down there. So just drag it up to the top, make sure you're on the top layer. And what you can see here is we have a really nice but quite bland, I would say, black and white. What is good about it is that we have really nice shadow detail in the hair. What you need to look out for is that you don't have clipped blacks, so that you have all of the detail in your shadows. So you can see the strands of hair here, unless it's obviously, this was shot on f2.8, so unless it is very blurry, shot on 1.4 or something, you should be seeing the detail in your shadows, and equally the detail in your whites. As you can see, so what I would normally do now is I would just create a new layer by pressing Command, Option, Shift and E. That's Command, Option, Shift and E, which is, I just need to get rid of this, sorry. Okay, and then I will go to Filter, Camera Raw Filter, and we're brought into this panel which looks quite like the panel in Lightroom. Okay, so you get all the same options as we have. You've got your curve, you've got your details, etc., and you've got your histogram. So you can see here, what's good about this is that we've got a nice range across the histogram. So obviously there's a lot of shadows because we have a lot of blacks and stuff here. But we also have the midtones of the skin and the lights of the t-shirt. So what we're going to try and do is just create a bit of depth in this black and white. So the first place we're going to go is our contrast slider. And I would say that we need to increase the contrast just to give ourselves that little bit more of a range. And you can see what the histogram does when I increase the contrast. You're just extending that black and white range. So we want to bring them up to maybe about, I think about here for now. I also think the highlights could do with increasing a little bit, just to bring a bit more range into that highlight, because it's quite low here. So I bring those up a little bit. A lot of the time I might bring down the highlights, but actually in this instance I think I'm happy to bring them up a little bit. So you can see. Now, the good thing about doing this in Lightroom or in Photoshop is that you can use a mask to get rid of any areas that you don't want to affect. So then I've already brought up my shadows. I might bring them up just a touch more, just so to make sure we have plenty of detail here. And the other place I will go often is the clarity slider. So I really like to have sharpness in my black and whites. So I'll take a look at that, and That looks pretty good. I think I might go a little bit more on the contrast. Yeah, good. Okay, so that's as much as I'm going to do. I'm not going to affect the curve here. I'm going to click OK, and let's look at what we've done. Okay, so just a couple of minor adjustments, particularly contrast, particularly clarity, and then playing around with the shadows and highlights, I would say, are definitely areas that you would want to do. Okay, so you can see we've made quite a substantial difference. Obviously we have a bit more detail back here in our black and white in our face, that's the clarity slider, but it also just looks like it has more depth. Another thing you can do just on the white t-shirt is you can go to create a levels layer by clicking on levels. You can get your white dropper and you can just drop it somewhere here, okay, and that will bring the white back into your image. So this is where your peak white is, wherever you feel like it should be white. And obviously this t-shirt at one point was white when I shot it, so it just looks a bit more like it should. So what I think doesn't look great, and you see it a lot in black and white images, is where your whites go grey, and you end up having greys instead of whites. And really, I think whites should be whites. So this is a nice tool to deal with that. What I would often do then is I have a mask on this levels layer, so I will take my black brush and I will just go back over the areas that I don't want to affect with this levels layer. So I don't particularly want to affect the skin that much. So what I'll do is I'll just brush that effect out on the skin. Okay, so I want to keep the skin nice and mid-tones. I'm not being very careful here now, so you can obviously be a bit more careful. Okay, and then you get a bit more contrast of the skin on the white, which is nice. So you can see here the levels layer has made a big difference. It's brightened up things, but actually by putting the mask on the skin, you end up with some really nice kind of depth to your skin. So what we've done so far, we've created a black and white layer on this color image by going to an adjustment layer. Then we've gone into camera raw filter and we've just brightened it up with some contrast, some clarity, increasing our highlights and increasing our shadows just a touch, just to give us that nice detail. Then we've gone into levels and we've just brought up the whites to give us that more detail here. Now we could do a vignette, or we could bring more detail into our face with a curves layer. So just if you wanted to do that, it's not something I always do. I don't think it needs to happen here, but just to show you how I might do it, you can create a dodge layer here, right? Just a gentle one, doesn't need to be anything special. And then Command I to invert it. Okay, then you need to take your white brush, so X to get your white brush tool, a flow of maybe like maximum 2%. Okay, so opacity 100, flow of 2 or 3. Okay, and then you just look for the brighter, lighter parts. So this softbox was at his left hand side as the camera person, am looking at it. So the light's more shining across his face onto here. But you can just see there's a little bit brighter areas here. You can just lighten those up a little bit. A little bit here. A little bit on his chin. And these are kind of big. You can see I'm not taking a whole lot of time. I would be obviously more careful with this. And one thing that is annoying me, which we can fix here, is this dark piece of skin here. Okay, so an easy way to fix that is just to go over that with your dodge and it's gone. Okay, and you can also just smooth out any of these areas that come in. When you increase the clarity, you will also, and the contrast, you will also increase all of this detail in the skin. So this dodge layer can help just to smooth out any of those bits. Okay, so we'll just look at what we've done there. Okay, so we've made quite a big difference in just a second. Now you don't need to do this. This is very much just to taste, really. And the next thing I would do then is create another layer, which would be a burn layer. So you can do this with the dodge and burn tool. This is just the way I've learned how to do it, so I kind of always do it this way. So you can bring down your midtones, just drag that layer down, Command I to invert it, stay on our brush on white, flow 2%. And as you can see, I'm using a big brush to do this, right? Because I'm affecting kind of bigger areas of the skin, okay? So I'm just going to bring that little bit of shadow back in here, just to create a bit more detail. And any areas where I feel there's kind of uneven skin tone, I might just reduce my brush size and fill those in so that it looks a bit more streamlined. So there we go. Might be a bit heavy on that cheek, so we don't want to overdo it. It's so easy to overdo it. And if you feel like you're overdoing it, you can just X this brush onto white and then just kind of undo a little bit of your work. So you can see here that's made quite a substantial difference, even though we only spent a second doing it. And so it really depends on how much of an impact you want to make to the skin. This looked quite well without these two layers. This was where we were. By adding a little bit of a dodge and a burn, we end up just bringing those highlights and shadows onto the face, just to give a bit more depth again to the portrait. Another thing you could do if you wanted to was to create a vignette around it. And actually what I might do now, I feel like I've gone a bit too far on the hair, so I might just darken that down a little bit with my brush while I have this dodge layer here. Just a little bit. We don't want the hair competing with the skin for attention. Your eyes will always be drawn to the brightest part, so I think that looks good. And I would leave it there. And if you wanted to sharpen it up a little bit on the eyes and the mouth, you could do that. But I think I'm happy with that. So thank you for watching. I hope it was helpful. Please leave comments or questions if you have any. Thank you.